HOA said it was just Wi-Fi, but I heard it humming in my walls. The HOA installed tech on my roof without asking. They called it essential. The FCC called it illegal. I didn't just shut off the signal. I brought the entire network down. Now my roof is quiet, but the neighborhood will never forget what I uncovered. I moved into the quietest house on the block until the humming started. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. When I first toured 14 Aspen Ridge Lane, it felt like stillness in a world that never stopped buzzing. The air was thick with pine, the roofline angled just right to catch the sunset. And inside, the silence was whole. The kind that settles in your bones like heat from a fireplace. After years in a high-rise cubicle life, I needed that kind of quiet. Craved it. That house was my promise to myself. Less chaos, more control. The neighborhood's Sterling Creek Estates looked like it had been designed in a lab for peaceful living. Lawn edges so sharp they looked photoshopped. Cars matching paint with mailboxes. Driveways pressure-washed weekly. The homes themselves? Cookie-cutter colonial meets suburban sci-fi. A little too clean. A little too uniform. And always under watch. I noticed the HOA right away. 3 women in pastel sweater sets, walking clipboards like they were service animals. One of them even knocked the first day I moved in. Brought a pamphlet and a bottle of HOA-branded hand sanitizer. "We care about cleanliness," she said, with a smile too straight to trust. Her name was Gretchen. And on that day, she introduced herself as President Gretchen Winters of the Sterling Creek Homeowners Association. "Welcome to our shared future." I remember that word because something in me flinched. Still, I signed the welcome forms, paid my dues, didn't ask questions. I was too busy scrubbing out moldy grout and replacing cracked tile. My home was a fixer-upper with good bones and bad habits. It needed me to focus. 3 months passed. I repainted the shutters, updated the HVAC, even replaced the crumbling gutters myself. My kind of peace isn't passive, it's earned. Brick by brick, line of code by line of code. Then one Thursday, I came home from work and noticed a white truck idling in front of my house. The logo on the side said Hyperrange Connect, faster together. I didn't think much of it until I walked around back and caught a glimpse of someone standing on my roof. I froze. There were 2 of them, hard hats and tool belts, hunched over what looked like a metal pole half the size of a flagpole. Wires snaked across my shingles, trailing into a black relay box bolted directly into the siding near my attic vent. I dropped my grocery bags and marched toward the porch. "Excuse me, what are you doing up there?" The younger guy glanced down, startled. The older one didn't even flinch. "Just finishing up an install," he shouted back, like that explained anything. I didn't give them permission. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even received a notice. Before I could finish dialing the HOA hotline printed on the back of their welcome pamphlet, a familiar voice called out. "Oh, you're home earlier than expected," Gretchen chirped, heels clicking down my driveway like she lived there. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing at the tower rising above my chimney like some techno spire from a dystopian film. She gave me that practiced HOA smile. "It's a shared mesh node. Very cutting edge. Sterling Creek is upgrading to a community Wi-Fi infrastructure. Your roof was optimal. Central, high elevation, great line of sight." "Did I approve this?" I asked. "You didn't object," she said casually. "We sent out a memo 3 weeks ago." "I never received a memo." "Well, the board reviewed it. The install passed by majority vote." She said it like that meant anything, like they were Congress and I was just a voter who'd missed the ballot. I stared up at the tower. It had a white cylindrical head, a blinking green light, and a faint metallic hum that vibrated the air just enough to feel in your teeth. I hadn't noticed it before, but now that I did, I couldn't unhear it. Gretchen followed my gaze and beamed. "It's barely noticeable, right? Think of it as a contribution to collective progress. The signal strength is already phenomenal." That night, I lay in bed and listened to the hum. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. A low-pitched whisper that curled around your eardrums and refused to leave. It settled into my walls, my pillow, the corners of my mind. I turned on a white noise machine. Didn't help. I put in earplugs. Still heard it, like it was under my skin. I didn't sleep. By morning, my head throbbed. My eyes burned. And when I stepped outside, the metal pole still pierced the sky over my roof like a misplaced satellite dish, blinking steadily, humming with authority. They said it was progress, but it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a quiet invasion, and I wasn't sure what scared me more, the technology on my roof, or how easily they put it there. It wasn't just the hum, it was the kind of restlessness that wraps around your bones. I'd toss and turn, feeling like my own room was repelling me. My dreams became metallic, static-ridden images of flashing lights, white noise, towers. I woke up with jaw pain from clenching. My vision pulsed if I stood up too quickly. I started logging everything. Time of day, pain level, sleep hours, dreams, symptoms. Even the moments the tower light blinked slightly faster, which I noticed through my blackout curtains. I downloaded a decibel meter app and measured the hum 36 dB at its lowest, 52 at peak. Then I bought an EMF reader. The numbers fluctuated wildly the closer I got to the attic. When I emailed the HOA, I didn't rant. I kept it professional. I attached a PDF of my symptom log and offered to show them the data. Gretchen's response came 2 days later. Thank you for your concern. We understand that adjusting to new infrastructure can be a sensitive experience for some. Please be assured the tower is well within safe FCC guidelines. There is no scientific evidence supporting claims of EMF sensitivity. Consider speaking with a wellness specialist to address underlying anxieties. Underlying anxieties. I reread that phrase 5 times. She may as well have patted me on the head through the screen. The next day, I tried talking to a few neighbors, subtle, casual, just asking if they noticed the buzzing or felt different since the installation. Most of them just smiled tightly and said things like, "Oh, we're used to it now," or "It's for the neighborhood." One woman across the street, Judy, actually took a step back from me like I'd sneezed. "I heard you're sensitive," she said, glancing at the blinking tower like it was a temple. "People said you've been acting kind of paranoid." I went back inside and closed all my blinds. I was alone now, not just physically. I'd become that neighbor, the one people whispered about. I might have stopped there, might have given in. But then Mr. Castor came by. He's the neighborhood's unofficial handyman. Mid-60s, always smells like sawdust. Owns more tools than I have socks. He stopped by to drop off a misdelivered package. As he handed it over, he looked up at my roof and muttered, "Huh. So they finally hit yours, huh?" "Sorry," I said, blinking. He hesitated. "Never mind. Not my place." I stepped forward. "Wait. What do you mean, finally?" He looked down the street, then leaned in slightly. "You didn't hear it from me, but you're not the first. They've tried this mesh node install thing before. Pilot projects. Other blocks, quiet pushback, quiet surrender. Most folks just gave up." I stared at him. "How many others?" He shook his head. "More than you'd think. They move fast, real quiet. It's all about coverage zones and efficiency. You've got the highest roofline for half a mile. They were always gonna tag you." That night, I didn't try to sleep. I dug instead. Online, through public FCC filings, tower specifications, HOA board minutes, what little they published, and in the middle of a tech forum thread about unregulated mesh relays, I found a term I'd never seen before. My tower model matched. I cross-checked specs. These weren't just relays. They were dynamic frequency hopping transmitters, untraceable to the average scanner. I printed it all, highlighted, annotated. The next morning, I noticed a flyer taped to a neighbor's mailbox. Their kid Evan was missing school due to unexplained nosebleeds and insomnia. The note said they were consulting a specialist. That was the moment the fear cracked wide open. I wasn't being paranoid. Something was wrong up there. And now I wasn't just documenting it. I was going to expose it. No more emails. No more wellness suggestions. I was done being told it was harmless. Because I couldn't sleep. And the tower never did either. The login page for the HOA portal had always been clunky. Outdated interface, broken navigation bar, half the links led to 404 errors. But that night, around 2:17 a.m., lit only by the glow of my third cup of cold coffee and the blue pulse of the tower through my blinds, I decided I wasn't just going to dig. I was going to dissect. I've worked in network security for over a decade. I know how people hide things online badly, especially people who think no one's smart enough to look. And HOA admins, they don't exactly scream cyberops. I started with the resident dashboard, checking what was listed under public board documents. The usual budget reports, paint color guidelines, an old PDF titled Holiday Light Restrictions, revised, but then I hit Site Infrastructure Requests, under a section labeled Maintenance Coordination. That's where the breadcrumb trail began. It was subtle, a single entry titled Node Expansion Initiative. Addendum D, uploaded 2 months before the towers went up. Not even filed under the technology or zoning tags, just miscellaneous. It was scanned, low-res, half of it crooked. But I tilted my head, zoomed in, and read, Authorization granted for mesh node relay expansion, as per vendor recommendations. Installation to proceed under emergency compliance policy for improved neighborhood network efficiency. There were only 2 signatures at the bottom. One was Gretchen's. The other, a name I didn't recognize. Or Vickery, South Shell Contracting, LLC. No HOA vote count. No minutes, no timestamp of full board approval. That's not just shady, that's procedural fraud. I pulled the HOA bylaws. Any infrastructure modification, especially anything involving third-party contractors, requires full board consensus, member disclosure, and a minimum 10-day notice before execution. This had none of it. And buried 2 pages deeper was the bombshell, the tech specs. The towers were listed as SEN XR12 signal relay units, 5G capable, auto-hopping, with mention of a non-licensed mesh broadcasting protocol. I stopped. Read it again. Non-licensed mesh broadcasting. In simpler terms, these towers weren't approved by the FCC. At least, not for the way they were being used. I pulled up the FCC equipment database. Typed in the SEN XR12 model. Nothing. I typed slower, broader terms. SEN X. Finally, I got a hit. But it was under prototype testing status. A small note at the bottom, use restricted to authorized lab environments under Part 15, not cleared for residential deployment. I felt a flush crawl up my neck, cold and furious. They didn't just skip consent, they broke federal law. And they documented it. Buried deep in the addendum was a frequency chart. I didn't need a translation. It was spitting signal bands well above residential EMF guidelines, specifically into the upper 6 GHz range. I cross-referenced it with FCC Part 15B regulation. Any broadcasting above those limits, without proper shielding and registration, is considered unlicensed radiative transmission. A finable offense, a shutdown-level offense. And if that wasn't enough, I found the cherry on top. A handwritten note in the margin of the scanned doc. Keep under radar, no community memo needed. Central Homes prioritized for beta performance. I sat back in my chair. The room was quiet, except for the low, ceaseless hum above me. They targeted me, not because I volunteered, not because I agreed, because my house sits at the center of the grid, because I have the tallest roofline, and the best line of sight to threes, because I was new, quiet, easy to ignore. They thought I'd be afraid of the jargon, of the forms, of the science. But this is my language. I speak protocol. I speak brief. I began printing. Every page. The infrastructure addendum. The frequency charts. FCC comparison tables. Screenshots of portal access logs. I highlighted every rule violated, every consent line skipped, every technical line that crossed the legal threshold. Then I saved copies to encrypted cloud storage and a flash drive. I labeled HOA violation. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was prepping for exposure. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't lie down. I built a report. A real one. Because they wrote their power grab in signal waves and buried signatures. But I knew how to read the static. And I was done humming along. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Bold red letters at the top. Notice of fine. Failure to comply with HOA communications and obstructing necessary telecommunications infrastructure. 500. They said I was non-cooperative. That I was endangering the neighborhood's connectivity. But they were the ones who'd snuck a power relay onto my roof, without permission, without permits, without even knocking on my door. I sat at my kitchen table, rereading the notice, while sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, heart hammering slow and steady like a war drum. They wanted a battle? I'd give them one. First, I called Mason, my high school friend and a licensed electrician, with a particular gift for making complicated systems very, very simple. I sent him the photos of the wiring they'd hidden under the eaves. He whistled through the phone. "That's an ungrounded relay box," he said, "and it's spliced into your main breaker. That's theft, plain and simple. And illegal." "Illegal and dangerous," he replied. "We fix this, and you won't just be in the right. You'll be a damn folk hero." By Wednesday, Mason was at my house with a toolkit, a GoPro, and a document folder thick with municipal code. We climbed onto the roof just after dawn. Mason filmed every wire, every connection, every stickerless, unregistered box pulsing with stolen current. The network tower at the corner of the cul-de-sac blinked its steady green light, powered, ironically, by the woman they'd just fined. "They're leaning on you," Mason muttered, hands deftly unwinding the illegal splice. "But they don't realize you're the power plant." I smiled grimly. Not for long. By noon, the reroute was complete. We installed a legal shutoff upstream from the splice, one that cut the uninvited feed but left my home's power untouched. Mason signed and dated a certificate of correction. Everything we'd done was above board. I had it on video. I had it notarized. Then I flipped the switch. Nothing dramatic happened at first. Just a quiet click, the kind of sound that usually meant done. But 20 minutes later, things got loud. Across the street, I saw the first sign. The HOA's surveillance camera spun lazily before going dead. Wi-Fi security systems chirped with lost connections. And then the tower, its green light blinked twice, then darkened. The signal was gone. The neighborhood fell into a hush more unnerving than any alarm. Doorbells stopped working. Smart locks froze. Tablets refused to connect. The HOA's prized Smart Community Initiative offline. By Thursday morning, my inbox exploded. Gretchen, the HOA president, sent me a flaming hot email titled, "UN Authorized Tampering. Immediate response required." She threatened legal action, demanded I restore the power, claimed the board would pursue all consequences available under community governance statute. I waited 6 hours before responding, just long enough to let the panic set in. Then I sent her a reply with a time-stamped video attachment. It showed Mason on my roof, narrating the unlicensed power tap and its removal. I attached the municipal codes it violated. I even included a PDF of the shutoff's permit, certified by the city's Building Safety Division. Finally, I dropped in a line that was more devastating than any threat. As this installation was made without consent, licensing, or inspection, I've exercised my legal right to disconnect my private infrastructure from unauthorized use. Power remains fully functional to my home. Your concern should be directed toward whomever approved the illegal tap. No threats, no caps lock, just a mirror, held up for Gretchen to see the depth of her mistake. By Friday, I received a second notice, not from the HOA, but from the city's Office of Utility Compliance. They were opening an investigation into the neighborhood's unauthorized power relay system. A field agent would be inspecting the area within the week. As for the $500 fine, I framed it and hung it on the wall right next to the breaker box. Because the next time they tried to mess with my property, they'd remember, I don't just pay for power, I own it. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Bold red letters at the top. Notice of fine. Failure to comply with HOA communications and obstructing necessary telecommunications infrastructure. They said I was non-cooperative, that I was endangering the neighborhood's connectivity, but they were the ones who'd snuck a power relay onto my roof without permission, without permits, without even knocking on my door. I sat at my kitchen table, rereading the notice while sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, heart hammering slow and steady like a war drum. They wanted a battle, I'd give them one. First, I called Mason, my high school friend, and a licensed electrician with a particular gift for making complicated systems very, very simple. I sent him the photos of the wiring they'd hidden under the eaves. He whistled through the phone. "That's an ungrounded relay box," he said, and it's spliced into your main breaker. That's theft, plain and simple. And illegal? Illegal and dangerous, he replied. We fix this, and you won't just be in the right, you'll be a damn folk hero. By Wednesday, Mason was at my house with a toolkit, a GoPro, and a document folder thick with municipal code. We climbed onto the roof just after dawn. Mason filmed every wire, every connection, every stickerless, unregistered box pulsing with stolen current. The network tower at the corner of the cul-de-sac blinked its steady green light, powered ironically by the woman they'd just fined. They're leaning on you, Mason muttered, hands deftly unwinding the illegal splice, but they don't realize you're the power plant. I smiled grimly. Not for long. By noon, the reroute was complete. We installed a legal shutoff upstream from the splice, one that cut the uninvited feed but left my home's power untouched. Mason signed and dated a certificate of correction. Everything we'd done was above board. I had it on video. I had it notarized. Then I flipped a switch. Nothing dramatic happened at first. Just a quiet click, the kind of sound that usually meant done. But 20 minutes later, things got loud. Across the street, I saw the first sign. The HOA's surveillance camera spun lazily before going dead. Wi-Fi security systems chirped with lost connections. And then the tower. Its green light blinked twice, then darkened. The signal was gone. The neighborhood fell into a hush more unnerving than any alarm. Doorbells stopped working. Smart locks froze. Tablets refused to connect. The HOA's prized Smart Community Initiative offline. By Thursday morning, my inbox exploded. Gretchen, the HOA president, sent me a flaming hot email titled "Unauthorized tampering. Immediate response required." She threatened legal action, demanded I restore the power, claimed the board would pursue all consequences available under community governance statutes. I waited 6 hours before responding, just long enough to let the panic set in. Then I sent her a reply with a time-stamped video attachment. It showed Mason on my roof, narrating the unlicensed power tap and its removal. I attached the municipal codes it violated. I even included a PDF of the shutoff's permit, certified by the city's Building Safety Division. Finally, I dropped in a line that was more devastating than any threat. As this installation was made without consent, licensing or inspection, I've exercised my legal right to disconnect my private infrastructure from unauthorized use. Power remains fully functional to my home. Your concern should be directed toward whomever approved the illegal tap. No threats, no caps lock. Just a mirror, held up for Gretchen to see the depth of her mistake. By Friday, I received a second notice, not from the HOA, but from the city's Office of Utility Compliance. They were opening an investigation into the neighborhood's unauthorized power relay system. A field agent would be inspecting the area within the week. As for the $500 fine, I framed it and hung it on the wall right next to the breaker box. Because the next time they tried to mess with my property, they'd remember. I don't just pay for power. I own it. A handful of neighbors had gathered by now, drifting onto their lawns like confused deer in headlights. Some clutched their phones, wondering why their apps weren't working. Others just looked dazed. The agents didn't explain. They didn't have to. The message was loud and clear. The HOA's little side hustle had just crossed a federal line. I stayed on my lawn, feet bare in the cool morning grass, watching Gretchen scramble in real time. No yelling, no smug smiles. Just stillness. When she finally turned to me, her expression said everything. Confusion, fury, humiliation, and the terrible realization that the power she'd thrown around like a weapon didn't extend past the end of her driveway. I met her gaze and nodded once. Calm. Final. I didn't bring war. I brought the right form. Later that afternoon, every homeowner who'd housed a relay device received a printed notice left by the FCC outlining the violations and potential civil penalties. I recognized a few of the model numbers listed. One of them matched the box they'd wired through my attic, without so much as a heads up. Gretchen's house went dark shortly after. No porch light, no chirping smart lock, no surveillance feed. It wasn't just a blackout, it was a reset. The board sent a vague email that evening, claiming the Smart Grid initiative was being temporarily suspended pending technical review. No apology, no mention of federal agents. But we all knew. And in the center of it all, I stood grounded, not just in my lawn, but in something deeper. Not vengeance, not pride, just truth. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when the lines were crossed, I'd held the receipts. And now the feds had them too. It started with a knock gentler than the FCC, but with a similar undertone of curiosity laced with consequence. "Hi," the young woman said, holding out a press badge. "I'm with Channel 4 Local. Mind if I ask about the federal agents on your street last week?" I didn't mind. We sat on my porch. I gave her the bare bones. How the HOA installed unauthorized relay devices on private homes, mine included. How they tapped into my power line without permission. How they fined me for non-compliance. And how the FCC had other ideas. She listened closely, nodding slowly, her recorder blinking red on the patio table between us. When she asked if I'd known what I was doing when I shut off the relay, I told her the truth. No one listens until you cut the current. The segment aired 2 days later. Homeowner shuts down, illegal HOA network, cites privacy and property violations. Within hours, the story leapt from local news to a regional thread. A reporter in Austin asked for interview rights. A podcast called Neighborhood Justice emailed asking for documents. Reddit ran wild. I didn't speak in front of a camera again, but I didn't need to. I posted everything anonymously. The violation logs, the photos, the FCC inspection summary, even a video clip of the illegal wiring under my eaves, narrated by Mason, who'd suddenly become a folk hero among electricians. The response was immediate. Support poured in from strangers. Other homeowners, former HOA board members from different states, all sharing their own stories of abuse, overreach, and retaliation. But the most surprising voices came from next door. That weekend, my neighbor Linda knocked on my door with a pineapple cinnamon, still warm. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to make waves. You were braver than all of us." Then came James from 2 doors down, the guy who always voted with the board. He looked sheepish. "They pressured us," he admitted. "Told us it was for emergency communications. Threatened fines if we didn't allow access." I should have asked more questions. I told him it wasn't about blame. It was about light, and now the whole system had been dragged into it. The board held an emergency closed session the following Tuesday. The email was terse. The agenda wasn't shared. Attendance was board only, but the clubhouse remained unlocked. I went anyway. The long table was empty. No name tags, no files, no chairs pulled out. Just me, standing alone in the room where they'd once decided I owed them $500. I stood for a minute, in that stillness. Then I turned off the light. My roof made the news. Their silence made history. They thought they could write me out with a single paragraph. The letter was thin, 3 sentences long, but heavy with implication. Due to repeated disruptions and conduct deemed hostile to board operations, the HOA will vote to revoke your voting privileges. No hearing. No process, just a scheduled takedown masked as procedure. But if they wanted to use the rules, they'd have to follow all of them. I didn't respond with outrage. I responded with paperwork. Within 24 hours, I filed a formal petition, signed by over a dozen homeowners, to dissolve the current board for breach of fiduciary duty, abuse of authority, and failure to adhere to federal regulations. Under our HOA bylaws, that was all it took to trigger a special election. Most of the signatures came from neighbors who'd once ignored me. Now they handed me pens before I even asked. Then I got to work. No speeches, no front porch politics. Just quiet, steady conversations with documents. I knocked on doors holding a binder of FCC violation notices, screenshots of the illegal power tap, a printed transcript of Gretchen's recorded admission, and photos of the confiscated relay boxes. I included links to the Channel 4 news story, and a few notarized statements from residents who'd been coerced into compliance. I didn't promise change. I proved it was necessary. The vote came on a Thursday night. The community center was packed. Folding chairs spilled into the hallway. People brought their kids, their dogs, their questions. Gretchen tried to regain control, starting with a pre-written speech about civility and difficult personalities. But the room didn't buy it. Not after everything. When the ballots were tallied, the results were read aloud. I won in a landslide. Gretchen stood, stiff as stone, and resigned before the final numbers were even finished. No applause, just the sound of her heels retreating across laminate tile. I took her seat. The irony didn't escape me. They had called the vote. I had shown up with the receipts. I looked around the room. The neighbors who had once whispered behind curtains now sat forward, listening, watching. From now on, I said, keeping my voice clear and calm, we install nothing without full homeowner approval. No shortcuts, no secrets, and we read the fine print, every word. It wasn't just a new policy, it was a new standard. I wasn't there to rule. I was there to remind them, power flows from the people, not through hidden wires in an attic. The board had tried to silence me. Instead, I became the chair. The hum is gone. No more low-frequency whine above my bedroom. No blinking lights out my attic vent. No unauthorized cables running through rafters like veins I never asked for. Just clean air, quiet shingles, and the soft creak of the wind. The relay tower is gone. As HOA chair, I rewrote the bylaws within the first month. All new installations, especially tech, now require homeowner consent, third-party documentation, and certified health impact assessments. No more backroom deals with vendors. No more board-only decisions disguised as community upgrades. If it broadcasts, stores, or listens, it needs a public vote. Transparency isn't optional anymore. It's policy. And the board? They're quieter now, too. A few old faces stepped down. New ones came in. Folks who cared more about gardens than gossip. The meetings are shorter. The tone is civil. We spend more time solving drainage issues than playing power games. Last week, I climbed up onto my roof for the first time since the relay was pulled. I patched the anchor holes, repainted the flashing, and in the spot where the box once stood, I installed a weather vane brushed copper, spinning free. It doesn't collect data, doesn't send a signal, just turns gently in the breeze. A symbol of what's been restored. They said that tower was essential. I proved it was illegal. Now, my signal is silence, and it's finally mine. Ever had something installed on your home without permission? Think your HOA can't cross legal lines? Think again. This isn't just a story, it's a blueprint for fighting back, step by strategic step. Keep watching, because what happened in Sterling Creek could happen anywhere. And next time, the tower might be on your roof.